Well, looking back to the works of the European Parliament in 2018, the Parliament returned back to the European Commission this document for further review. There were various committee-level discussions taking place, but the most important thing was, well, let me put it this way. The European Parliament is the final institution. The European Commission puts forward its motion, and then the European Parliament deliberates on it. And therefore, the member states were calling for as much flexibility as possible in order to have them a freedom of choice. And the European Parliament has yielded to the pressure. And I believe 154 MEPs, if I'm not wrong, didn't support the initial proposal. And for that reason, and of course, we in the Baltic states, we are unhappy about not a full level convergence and not delivering on the promises, the ones that I have already covered in my intervention. There may be a lot of things happening in the European Parliament. There could be just a case of a tie, or there may be only one vote for or against, which ruins the proposal. In the last tenure, the conservatives, the socials and conservatives, and they were in the majority, whereas in the current tenure of the parliament, you have at least many more votes in order to pass a motion. So sometimes one of the three forces or political parties does not support the decision, and that's how the decision is not adopted. Mr. Pranckietis, can you hear us?
Ar ponas Pranckietis dar prisijungęs?
Do we have Mr. Pranckietis with us? Oh, yes, I see. Because I had some problems about the camera. So, Mr. Pranckietis, what is your take on Mr. Ropė's view, rather critical or not? Indeed, 90 million in plus. We got more than initially we were proposed. 900 million more. So in terms of the scale and the country size, have we indeed bargained much more? Well, we were talking more or less the same, but using the different words. Let me remind you another story. Back in 2012, at the time that the former period of the cap payments were introduced, there was a promise from the European Union that our payments were to reach 90% of the EU average. So we see that we haven't traveled very far over those past 10 years. And I would also like to react on the size of micro farms. It is up to the member states to interpret small farms. For us, it's 10 hectares farm. In Poland, a small farm, to be regarded as a small farm, you have to have 20 hectares. I fully agree to the 25% of the bonus to organic farmers. And now we only get 9%, and I really don't know how we're going to substantiate this further development if we don't get any funding. And I would also like to react to the use of pest control and the chemicals and fertilizers. We're all aware of that. But I believe that there are people participating in this conference who may have a different take on the story by way of using future technologies or smart technologies to deal with the challenges, so that the fertilizers are applied according on a case by case rather than as a blanket decision for all the fields. I would also like to note that we're also involved in OECD, and the OECD's recommendations for Lithuania would be very much in line with the Green Deal's rules regulations. So it's either either we are going to comply with the Green Deal, or the Green Deal is going to be brought to us. According to the OECD recommendations, the load about the fertilizer load not used in agriculture, but rather the fertilizer waste, which is being washed into the drinking water, groundwater. That is an issue. I personally know Mr. Ropė for quite some time, and I don't think that we are conflicting each other, although we have been acting on different levels, but at least we agree on one
Ponas
thing, that
Ropė,
all
jūs
the
minėjote
measures
tokį įdomų
have to
skaičių.
be supported by
90
funding. Mr.
procentų
Ropė,
Europos
you
ūkininkų
noted that
jų ūkiai
90%
iki
of
10
EU
hektarų.
farmers,
Ir
they
jie
have the
šitose
farms up to 10
programose galės
hectares
dalyvauti,
in
galės
size.
nedalyvauti.
And they will be eligible
Kokia
or not
tikimybė,
eligible for
kad
this
vyriausybėms
program.
pavyks juos įtikinti
What is the
dalyvauti?
likelihood of
Nes
the
prievarta
government
ne
persuading
visai
them to
priimtina.
participate
Jo, čia
in
tokia
these
pati
programs?
išimtis, ten buvo
Well,
dar
there was an
daugiau
exception made or
išimčių
derogation
visokių
made.
diskutuojama, bet
There have been many
jau
more
galutiniam
on a
dokumentu
table,
susitarime sudaryta
but the
liko
final
tokia išimtis, kad
agreement with the council has
ūkiai
only
iki
this
10
derogation, that
hektarų,
the farms up to 10
nesvarbu
hectares
jie,
in
nu,
size,
kokių ten statusas valstybės
regardless
narės,
of their
bet
status,
galės, reiškia,
they will be
sėjomainos šlapžemėse
for crop
išlaikymui
rotation and
dalyvauti arba
for
nedalyvauti.
wetland preservation, they will be able to participate, they will be
Galbūt
eligible.
ne visi, galbūt ne
Maybe not all of
masiškai,
them are going to
bet
contribute, not
priklausys
on
nuo
a
to,
full
kuo tas
scale.
ūkis
It
užsiima
will
iki
very
10
much
hektarų.
depend on the
Tai
current occupation of that
ir kaip
farm. What
bus,
does it do at the moment?
ir kaip bus tos, sakykime, tos programos, ar jos apsimokės.
And whether these programs are going to be value for money, just as Mr. Pranckietis said. Well, it is quite a difference whether you get 50 euro or 500 euro for the same land plot. Nowadays, we hear about the requirement to introduce crop rotation, the preservation of meadows, or the certain percentage up to 4% of all the fields, or even restoration of meadows. On the other hand, the ministry introduced various prohibitions on use of green fertilizer. So what happens if farmers are going to leave all the cut grass on the fields, and if this person is going to be sanctioned for that, for doing that? So the greening programs call for possibilities of a farmer to avail of all the possible technologies. So we shall not limit them.
Vieną kaip ir lydintį klausimą.
I have one leading question.
Šitame forume Augustas Alešūnas skaitydamas
Some time ago,
pranešimą minėjo,
Mr. Alešūnas mentioned
kad yra tokia šalis kaip Kinija,
there is such a country as China.
statė 2200 metų.
And you may know it that the grand wall of the Chinese wall was built for 200 years. And nowadays, we have that ambition by 2030 or by 2200 years, the Chinese wall was built. So is it really possible that the EU is unanimous and to achieve its ambitious goals by as fast as by 2030, by 2040? Well, we have agreed by 2030 to reduce the carbon emissions not by 30, but by 50%. Nowadays, we are drafting rules and regulations. There is going to be some social tax. There will be some financial possibilities. How to implement the programs to cut down on the emissions by 50%. We have to bear in mind that the key pollutants are industry, transport, and others. So in Lithuania, we have the transportation field as the key pollutant. We have to look for the solutions, and it would be very important to start from the public transport or transport or vehicles used by the ministries or by public authorities to set an example. If we don't do this, if we don't act ourselves, if we don't make an example of ourselves, then how can we expect others to follow? And the monitoring is expected to happen every year, not every 5 years. So every year we will see how good the states are at delivering on their promises. And on the basis of that, the funding will be made available. The EU is at the moment the only one having set itself such ambitious goals. And you may know that Germany has also set its own ambitious goals. So there are some processes taking place, and we have to do it in common sense. We shall not lose common sense by not making the situation of our people worse. At the same time, we shall be very clear the way we are moving forward and to live better, not at the expense of the future or at the expense of the people. Mr. Pranckietis,
Iki politikos jūs buvot ūkininkas.
Before coming to
Ir
politics,
turbūt
you
pagal
were a
naują
farmer
schemą
yourself.
priskiriamas prie smulkesnių.
And even under the new
Kaip
scheme, you were a
matytumėt
small
šiandien
farmer.
savo ūkį, vat, naujosios
How would
politikos
you
perspektyvoj? Ką darytumėt,
what
ką
would be
keistumėt?
your ideas about your farm, given the political decisions that have been made with regard to small farms? Mr.
Nėra
Pranckietis
garso?
has not unmuted himself.
Ar ponas Pranckietis mus girdi?
Can Mr. Pranckietis hear us? He's nodding in agreement, but
Mes jūsų negirdime, sekundę, tuoj pažiūrėsim.
now we can hear. Now we can hear you.
Ar girdėjote klausimą, ar pakartoti?
Can I talk?
Taip.
I heard your question. First of all, allow me to pick up on what Mr. Ropė said about the farmers. We have to respect our social stakeholders, and we have to have a very clear message sent for them, what they can do. Allow me to introduce some correction about the reference meadows. The ministry agreed that the reference meadows shall be set on a national scale, so not on a farm level scale, but on a national scale. So the problem is dealt with. With regard to the social fund, it is still under the discussion, and Lithuania has set its ambition. And after post 2032, what is going to happen? Are we going to have it or not? In response to your question about a small farm, by the way, I've been farming for 20 years. I was very proud of being self-sufficient, and we managed to live by on 1 hectare, and we earned as much as I would wish everybody to be so economically viable on such a small scale. And we had this niche production. Well, it's not a solution for everybody. Not everybody raising 2 or 3 cows can expect to have a decent level. And so we have some niche type of production which have a future. So would you still have to change anything on that 1 hectare farm in order to meet the current requirements? Or do you believe that there is some segment of farms that are not going to be affected at all by the new requirements? Do you think that some of the farms will have to adapt to the Green Deal? Well, if we're not going to adapt to the Green Deal is going to adapt to us. We're not talking about exceptional requirements that are completely impossible. The rules have to be very clear, and that is the problem. We do not have very clearly set rules. We only have the ambitions set for us, but we do not have the rules. How to do that? Mr. Ropė, would you agree with Mr. Pranckietis that nowadays we have a very interesting situation? We have the political agenda, the money has been allocated, but there are no clear rules how to make this happen. Well, when it comes to the final rules, well, they should be set in motion by 2023, because the new period of the CAP policy is going to be launched only as of 2023. Lithuania, the ministry and the MEPs of Lithuania shall hear the farmers' voice. You cannot make decisions in your ivory tower. And we are sort of trying to create the life for the farmers, but we shall listen to the farmers. Maybe they are going to do even more than we could imagine. And in that way, we're going to have double the benefit than we had hoped for. And in order not to abuse the working conditions, the new cap as of 2025, there will be a new requirement for appropriate working conditions for people working on the farm. And that would be directly linked with the direct payments. Can I react to what Mr. Ropė said? Yes, of course. I would fully agree, and this is what I emphasized twice. Our social partners, our farmers have to be heard, and these OECD's recommendations also are very clear about it, that those regional population should have a say on the life in the regions, rather than it would be somebody in the capital who decide how the regions should live. So I'm very happy that at least on that we agree. And let us hope for the future that our farmers and our stakeholders are going to have their life much easier rather than more difficult. Thank you very much. So we complete the first part of the discussion. We had Viktoras Pranckietis, the chairman of the Rural Affairs Committee of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania.
Lietuvos Respublikos Seimo kaimo reikalų komiteto.
And a former farmer. And Mr. Ropė, MEP. Thank you very much for participating in our discussion. Thank you very much for having us.